This film is a fictionalized account of events taking place between 2001 and 2029. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, locales, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. In 2020, a virus named SARS-29 spreads rapidly across the world, disrupting lives, economies, and eventually governments. In its aftermath, the world sinks into a deep and severe economic depression, unparalleled in all of modern history. The worst, however, is yet to come. On April 3rd, 2022, a wave of unexplained deaths hits New York City. Over 300,000 people die in less than 24 hours. Only a week later, on April 10th, the CDC announces a new mutation of the virus named SARS-29. The new virus activates latent SARS-29 infections in the spinal fluid of recovered and previously asymptomatic patients, causing paralysis, strokes, heart attacks, and in the majority of cases, instant death. Over 600 million people die between June and August. A vaccine is developed in December 2022, but is not widely available for another 6 months. By August 2023, SARS-29 has claimed the lives of over 1.5 billion people. The SARS pandemic, however, is far from over. In January 2024, NATO, Russian, and Chinese troops returning home from the Middle East begin dying en masse, despite having received vaccinations to SARS-29. The new virus is identified as SARS-24. In the majority of cases, patients die suddenly after being asymptomatic carriers for several weeks. 2 billion lives are lost to SARS-24 in 2024. The final case of SARS-24 is recorded on October 1st, 2027. The total worldwide death toll from the SARS viruses stands at over 4 billion. The following is a documentary presentation of those that have survived the SARS pandemics. These are their stories, recorded during 2029.
Robert Wilson is not your ordinary Englishman. Called by Rolling Stone as one of the preeminent musicians of our time, his band Hamlet skyrocketed to fame in 2027, reaching #1 in the Billboard charts in both England and America. He reached out to us from Newcastle while on a break from his latest virtual tour.
Am I on?
Yes, we're recording.
Sorry, what was the question?
How did you survive the pandemic?
Which one?
Either the SARS-29 or the SARS-24 pandemic.
Can I talk about SARS-19? Those were better days, yeah, when people still had families and when people still had hope.
Hope about what?
That things would go back to normal.
Not to mention you could still go to the grocery stores back then.
Yeah, and not worry about dropping dead, or how you're going to feed yourself, or who's going to bring the next cough that's going to kill entire communities.
Those were better days.
Yeah, they were.
Do you need a glass of water?
No, I'll be fine. Just give me a minute. This damn fever and cough hasn't gone away since 2020.
I'm Dr. Tony Fremont, and I'm a former SARS-29 vaccine researcher. What exactly would you like to talk about today?
We are making a documentary about how the world has changed and dealt with the SARS pandemics the last 10 years.
Oh, okay. Well, I joined the SARS Institute in 2023 to join the team that was working on finding a vaccine for SARS-29. There was a world effort, concerted effort, to find a vaccine because 600 million people were killed in 3 months. I mean, it was devastating. The global supply chain, I'm sure most everybody remembers that.
Ah, the days of the great lockdown.
Yeah, when the world government were forced to admit the truth.
What truth?
The truth that the immune system could not actually defeat SARS-29. It lay inactive, dormant, but manifested itself in other ways that allowed us to realize what it actually was.
And what was it?
Some believe SARS was a bioweapon engineered to look totally natural. But I think that does a great disservice to the genius, to evolution. I mean, it's gigantic hubris to think that we're the most powerful life forms on the planet. We're not.
Dr. Freeman, however, is a minority voice. Not everyone believes SARS is a natural virus. We now travel to Langley, Virginia to meet Bill O'Connor, former Special Operations Commando and celebrated author of the book, How SARS All Got Started, who, on an operation in the heart of the Middle East in 2022, uncovered evidence that implicated SARS was actually a genetically engineered bioweapon. Hello, Bill. Can you state your name and occupation for the camera to begin the interview?
My name is William Connor. I'm a former contractor for the CIA. Also a Navy SEAL Special Ops Commando.
In your book, you wrote that you were on a mission that discovered the origins of SARS-29. Can you tell us about that mission and where it took place?
Yeah, it took place in Iran. Our team was in the dark about everything. Except that we were extracting an asset of Israeli intelligence from the outskirts of Shiraz.
When did you first learn that your mission would discover the origin of SARS?
Not until the end of the mission. At first it just seemed like your routine night app, apart from being in the heart of Iran.
In your book, you write that several of the helicopters went down on the way and due to anti-aircraft fire. How did you survive that?
Yeah, most of us jumped out before the copters went down. But to be honest, we were in the middle of a battlefield between the Iranians and the Israelis. It was a nightmare. Bullets flying, and screaming, and explosions.
And how did you survive that?
The Iranians are like the Iraqis in a firefight. Whole lot of bark, but very little bite. Plus, some of the copters that didn't go down were still operational.
Your mission was just after Iran had invaded and annexed Yemen, Iraq, Kuwait, and Syria, correct?
Yeah, that was a very scary time to be in the Middle East. The northern flanks of the Iranian army somehow overrun the Kurds and the Turkish alliance, and that progressed to the Battle of Istanbul. And by then, the European countries started mobilizing like it was World War I all over again.
Getting back to the asset you extracted, how did the rest of that mission play out?
Well, our copter had mechanical issues about 100 clicks out from the Israeli border, so we had to ditch the Black Hawk and travel the rest of the way on foot. Normally, if you crash on enemy territory and travel on foot, it's a death sentence, but not during SARS-29. It was on that walk to the border that we started learning about the origins of SARS-19. The asset was an Iranian who worked for the Revolutionary Guard's Bioweapons Division. He was sent to China in 2012 to retrieve fecal matter of bats that contain hundreds of very dangerous viruses. He said that the SARS sparked Iranians' interest because of its unique properties and how it can be modified to be the perfect weapon for asymmetrical warfare, the perfect weapon the religious zealots running that country could use to take down the world.
William O'Connor is not alone in believing that SARS was a bioweapon. Our next destination is Oxford, England, where we'll be speaking with a former MI6 analyst who has published dozens of articles claiming SARS was part of an asymmetrical warfare program developed by a foreign power. Hi, Mary. Can you please confirm your name and occupation for the camera?
Hello, my name is Mary. I worked for MI6 until the dissolution of the monarchy, but after the revolution in 2026, I found employment as a contractor for an agricultural automation company just outside of Oxford.
You mentioned the dissolution of the United Kingdom. What was it like to experience the political upheavals of that time?
It was absolutely god-awful. Young kids robbing their grandparents for a loaf of bread. Not to mention when the Irish Army pillaged the English countryside during the global famine of 2025. Not a bloody soul to stop them. All our troops had died after returning from the war in Iran.
I remember the newscasts of London and Manchester burning during the hunger riots. Were you there?
No. At the time, I was living at my family's cottage in the countryside to help my father. He suffered from Alzheimer's before passing away of natural causes in 2027.
You mentioned you worked for MI6. What was your job there?
Before the revolution, my job at MI6 was to analyze the asymmetrical warfare capabilities of other nations. Basically, to study the ways another country could conduct war using unconventional weapons and tactics. However, no one saw SARS coming. It wasn't until the second pandemic in 2022 that I think we realized at MI6 that we'd been attacked. But by then it was too late.
Most people in 2022 were looking for someone to blame, and opinions about how we should have responded to SARS began to radically shift. How did that play out in the United Kingdom?
Near the end of the second pandemic in 2022, people stopped listening to corporate-controlled news pundits who were reinforcing this ridiculous narrative that the mutations of SARS were naturally occurring. We were all so tired of hearing those peddling false hopes, whether it be of a herd immunity or a vaccine. Opinions shifted as the death tolls rose, and we all stopped listening to propaganda and started listening to common sense.
And what did common sense say?
That only a complete idiot could believe that SARS was not a uniquely engineered bioweapon.
What did you learn while working in the intelligence community about the family of SARS viruses?
I didn't learn much back then about SARS, at least from anything we gathered from actionable intelligence. I never had any research to back up my claims about bioweapons, but all you have to do is look at the facts of what happened to draw your own conclusions. The SARS-29 virus was meant to spread, if you ask me. I don't think it was ever meant to kill anyone the way it did. Just to infect as many people as possible, to get in their bodies and lie in their spinal fluid, inactive, latent, and waiting.
Waiting for what?
For SARS-29, which activated the latent SARS-19 virus. It was SARS-29 that was meant to pull the kill switch latent in SARS-19. SARS-29 was the virus to end all viruses. The one that put Ebola, HIV, and all other viruses to shame. The sum of all fears. A virus with no treatment, no known vaccine, and no way to know you'd been infected till it instantly kills you. The summer of 2022 was the worst. Millions dying every day of sudden heart attacks, strokes, unexplained organ failures, and immune overreactions.
Do you think the Iranians developed this? Don't you think they would have known SARS would have come back to haunt them?
No one knows with apodictic certainty it was the Iranians, because any evidence, if there was any, was wiped away by nuclear weapons. However, assuming it was the Iranians, I really don't think whoever developed the virus put much thought into how they released the pathogen. I also don't think they ever thought of all the ways it could come back to hurt them. I mean, we've all seen photos of modern-day Iran.
You mean what was once Iran?
Of course. The nukes made sure Iran was wiped off the map. And they even say the Chinese army went in after the nukes to make sure no Iranian would live to ever do what they did again. One would think that if it were the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, they would have realized the precarious position they put themselves in by developing such a pathogen. However, perhaps the goal was to destroy America, create a power vacuum which they could then exploit. After all, when you've nothing left to lose, all options are on the table. And that was the whole point of asymmetrical warfare. To create a weapon that can destroy your enemy and which cannot be traced back to you. And the Iranians would have succeeded had the virus not had such unexpected outcomes, like the hospitals in Italy in 2020 being overrun, or the virus running rampant in Iran itself. Some say the Chinese army knew about the true origins of SARS, and that's why they shut everything down so swiftly. But we didn't have a clue back at MI6, and neither did our friends at the CIA. No one knew anything back then, or that the worst was yet to come.
You wrote in an online article that you believe SARS-19 was originally meant to spread like the common cold. Why do you believe SARS-19 was designed that way?
This is not a fact. This is just my opinion. I don't believe SARS was ever meant to show anything more than minor respiratory symptoms. I believe SARS was meant to spread like the common cold. If you ask me, SARS was never meant to kill and cause the alarm that it did, just to spread across the world and set things up for SARS-29 to target certain countries and finish the job in the event of a war.
When did you come to the conclusion it was the Iranians?
I've always had my suspicions that SARS was a bioweapon designed by any number of world powers. The Russians, the Chinese, North Koreans, some Islamic terrorist group. But it was not until the Israelis recovered intelligence, which quite possibly pointed to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as being the developers of SARS-19 and SARS-29, that I came to believe it was the Iranians. I was not the only one back then that arrived at the same conclusion. World opinion against Iran turned overnight. They became the most hated country in the world after America. Some say it was the Russians, French, and Chinese that nuked Iran because no one ever claimed responsibility for it. Even to this day, no country, not even the United Nations, has ever bothered investigating who nuked Iran. But if I had to bet, I'd say it was the Chinese, since their forces were the first ones at the border and who gunned down the Iranian refugees fleeing that radioactive wasteland. This will be an unpopular opinion, but at any other time in history, what the Chinese did would have been considered a war crime. But not now. Not after the 4 billion lives lost to SARS. The Chinese genocide of the Iranians and the world turning a blind eye to it were nothing more than an unofficial conviction and death sentence. For a moment, just after SARS-29, the world lost sight of its humanity and let its blind rage and need for revenge supplant its ability to let go of wrongs done. lost our goodness. We forgot how to forgive. And I think for future generations watching this, dealing with whatever blights your own time may bring, I think the key is this. Hold on to what makes us human, to what makes us good. Never let that go, no matter how difficult things may seem at the time. You will get through it, just as we shall survive, get through this.